I wonder if you've ever had this experience. Maybe you've planned to play a passing game in your class, let's say BB Bumblebee, and you anticipate playing a few rounds as part of your regular lesson segment, and then you're going to move on to another activity involving BB Bumblebee. But once you introduce the game and get going, you realize that students are all over the place with their passing skills. You have students moving it way too fast because they think that it's hot potato, and then you have students who are moving it way too slow because they're trying to really be careful and follow directions. And then you have like a student or two who gets the ball and it's like they have no idea what to do with it. If this has ever happened to you, you are certainly not alone. Passing games are deceptively difficult, even for our older students. And especially when we get into things where we are having to coordinate when to pick up and when to pass. That can be really, really tricky. So let's talk about some quick ways to scaffold passing games. We're going to focus on lower grades, specifically with like object passing games today in this video. And then in our next video, we will talk about upper grades and more complex passing games. So let's jump in. One of the best things that we can do is actually to not start with the passing game itself, but actually to back up and start as a whole class kinesthetic activity. There are a few options for this depending on what your students need. So let's start with the most basic one and we'll kind of move from there. The key to all of these scaffolds is that every single student in the room is keeping the beat in some way, even if they're not actually passing the object. The first thing to check in on is that students are actually aware of the steady beat. So let's stick with the rhyme BB Bumblebee as our example. Instead of passing an object around the room, around the circle, and someone is out at the end, we're just going to pat a steady beat altogether. And then the teacher or the student who was just it is going to call on someone to say where the class should keep the steady beat next in the next round of the game. So maybe it's on our elbow, maybe it's our head, maybe it's our shoulder, maybe it's our neighbor's shoulder, whatever you want. This is a really critical first step because if students don't keep the steady beat in their own personal kinesthetic space, they are going to have a very hard time tracking the beat around the circle when it's spread out. The next step up from this is for students to help you point to the steady beat around the circle. So as we speak the rhyme, everyone is pointing all together. This is a convenient way to play the game because number one, we can all see who the beat lands on, and that makes it an actual game, so it's a little bit more fun. And then we also have a built-in self-assessment because the whole class should be landing on the same person at the end of the game. So for this version, maybe the person who is out keeps a steady beat in the middle of the circle, maybe patting or playing an unpitched percussion, and that would preferably be a hand drum. And by the way, this pointing motion is the exact same thing that we're doing in something like Zapatitos Blancos, right? So keep in mind that you can hang out on this pointing all together as a class, pointing motion for a good chunk of the year. And students are still going to be successful, they will have a musical experience, and it's going to be pedagogically sound. So pointing all together as a class to track the steady beat is a really great option. The third scaffold can be combined with the other two if we need to. For this, we're going to add the passing object and play the game almost as normal. The difference is that the teacher is going to walk around behind the circle as students pass the ball, and you're going to point to the student who should have the object. You're essentially tracking the steady beat around the room with students. And again, the most important part is that everyone in the circle is keeping the beat as well. When they don't have the object, the ball, the beanbag, whatever it is, they're either going to be pointing with you as you move around the room, or they're keeping the steady beat somewhere on their body. At this point, maybe you let them choose if they point or pat, and maybe you just make a decision for the whole class. That's totally up to you. When it comes to tempo, remember that steady beat, the whole point of steady beat is that it keeps us together as an ensemble. So as we are passing the ball around the circle, if we get to one student who passes it too slowly, they're actually adjusting the tempo of the song. And in that case, or in this case, the rhyme BB Bumblebee, and in that case, I would go with that student's tempo and I would change the tempo of the song with the rest of the class. So it might end up sounding something like BB Bumblebee stung a man upon his knee, and then we keep going. But this is the type of thing that would lead to some more questions, the type of behavior that leads to some questions, and that is the assessment process. right? So we are going to pay attention to that student who is pausing when they pass the beat, when they are passing the beat too slowly. And some questions we're going to get curious about are they performing the steady beat accurately when they are patting and pointing? And then are they speaking the rhyme out loud with the rest of the class? If they are doing those two things, then it is likely that they just need a little bit more practice with the game. So we can let them continue playing and it is all good. They can continue playing and having a good time. Now, if they are not keeping a steady beat accurately and if they are not speaking the rhyme, then they'll just need a reminder to show those motions and speak it with the rest of the class. There are a lot of things to be distracted by in music class, and it's totally fine if student needs some reminders about how they should participate when they're not passing. And by the way, this can be a nonverbal reminder. So just make eye contact with the student from wherever you are in the circle and motion for them to pat the steady beat. That's for one student. Now, if there are multiple students passing the object inaccurately and adjusting the tempo of the whole class, then it's probably time to back up to one of the previous scaffolds. Now, the other thing that can happen here is that students think it's a game to adjust the tempo. So sometimes it happens that after you adjust the tempo for one student, pretty soon you might have like 4 or 5 students in the circle who are passing the beat too slowly as well, even though you know they've already demonstrated that they can pass the beat accurately. It's just because it's fun. And that's okay. So if students want to play with the tempo, that's fine. Do a whole class run through where they can pass at whatever tempo they want. So you go through that with the tempo exploration, and then you say as the teacher, okay, this time, that was so much fun. This time we're actually going to keep the same steady beat the whole entire time with the same tempo. It's actually good practice for students to identify steady and unsteady pulse, and then we can talk about why it's important for the whole ensemble to have the same steady beat tempo. So these are just a few of the things that we can keep in mind when we are working with lower grades and passing games. The purpose of the passing game is steady beat, so we can explore lots of different options, lots of different scaffolds for steady beats if students are not ready to track it around the room independently in the context of a game. In the next video, we will talk about how to adjust for more challenging games when we're working with upper grades. So I will see you then. Take care.